Welcome to World of Marketing Podcast, a Foster Web Marketing production. Here's your host, Tom Foster.
Hey everybody, it's Tom Foster on the World of Marketing, and today I have a special guest. Marco Salinas is an Amazon best-selling author and has co-authored a book with the legendary sales and personal development consultant Brian Tracy. I know Brian Tracy. I met Brian Tracy years ago, back when that was one of the very first conferences, marketing big conferences I went to, and bought his cassettes. That's how long I go back. All right. He is a longtime student of marketing legend Dan Kennedy. I also know Dan Kennedy. He's a good friend of mine. And a media and publishing consultant himself, having previously hosted a radio show on 9:30 a.m. The Answer in his hometown of San Antonio, Texas, and has been interviewed on local TV news affiliates in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. Marco is now a podcast producer and host at Business Innovators Radio Network, helping small to medium-sized businesses to grow through various strategic media marketing assets. And we're just going to nerd out and geek out here and talk about marketing stuff. Marco, thank you so much for coming to the World of Marketing and joining us today.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it, man. Really excited. I mean, this is like, out of all the podcasts I can do, if I get to talk to somebody that actually understands marketing, I mean, this is like, I'm going straight into dessert first. You know what I mean?
Right? That's all we do around here is marketing.
Love it.
So tell me how you got into it.
So in a previous life, I was running a different business. I was running a financial services business, actually, that I started in the year 2010. And so this was just kind of a couple of years after the last big, economic setback that we had back in 2008. And I was coming in as a 1099, working for the cable company, basically as a bill collector. And then ended up somewhere around 2009 doing some of this financial stuff part-time, working for this other guy up in Austin, Texas, and starting to learn about how that stuff worked and really starting to fall in love with it. And then being able to make that transition over to being self-employed and starting my own financial services business around that time period. No money, no seed money, no capital, no loans, nothing. I mean, it was kind of one of those, my back was against the wall kind of thing. And I partnered up with another guy that was also, we were both doing the same thing for the other company that we were working for. And we just felt like we could do it so much better because there were all kinds of problems with the company that we were working for. So we had this great determination and also probably a lot of naivety as well of what was to come, which I think helped us to do something so wild and crazy like that. Because had I known what was to come, I probably wouldn't have taken such a courageous leap. But that business ended up going on for a total of 13 years.
Wow.
9 years into it, I was able to buy out that partner as well. And that was something that I had been wanting to do for a long time. So finally convinced him to go ahead and go his separate way. And I bought him out and I said, this next coming up year, man, I mean, it's going to be all mine. I finally got ownership of this thing and I've got 9 years under my belt. And then of course, this little hiccup came along called COVID-19. And so that kind of just threw things for a loop and we started having kind of ups and downs and feasts and famine. And I started kind of doing somewhat of an inventory and saying, what all am I involved in here? I've got these other little side hustles, a couple of them that I'm doing. What do I personally enjoy the most? And of course, that overwhelming thing was always marketing. And so I was fortunate that when I started that business in 2010, probably about a year later in 2011, I ended up buying or signing up for a software service called Infusionsoft.
Yeah.
I'm sure you know Infusionsoft, Tom.
Yep.
And they had this special package that said, if you sign up now, we'll also give you this add-on, which is a bunch of goodies from this guy named Dan Kennedy.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know who Dan Kennedy was prior to. And so I got his resources and I started looking through it and I was fascinated with these letters that he had written, something called one of the things was called a customer reactivation campaign. And I said, customer reactivation campaign. What the heck? What in the world would you ever need that for? And so again, I'm brand new. I don't really know what's going on. And so I just said, well, all I know is that this guy's information is very intriguing. Maybe I should look into following him a little bit more, and end up buying his books and joining his monthly newsletter and all that kind of stuff. And I quickly found out that the things that Dan was talking about had the potential to totally just change your whole entire business. And so I started learning those things and trying to implement them in that financial services business, a lot of trial and error, different things, but at least I was learning and getting these experiences. And like I said, I quickly found out that this was the way to go. Like, if you really wanted to change things and you really wanted to grow your business, you really had to latch on, not just to marketing, but especially if you could, Dan Kennedy style marketing. So now I've decided to go all in with the marketing stuff. I've got my own agency. I actually started it back in 2014, but it was kind of a side hustle. Wasn't really doing a whole lot with it. And then maybe in the last year or so, decided that I was going to turn this into my full-time gig. And so over the last year or so, I've been focused on helping business owners to implement these types of Dan Kennedy mostly type strategies to grow their businesses.
Wow. So what are some examples of those? Like, what types of businesses?
So I've got a wide range of clients under my belt. I've got a software as a service company that I am working with under the fintech space. I've got a solar company. I've got a HVAC, a few lawyers, definitely a few people in the real estate and mortgage space, a little bit of insurance. I've got an IT company. So most of them, though, would still, for the most part, fall under professional service providers, I should say. That's definitely the primary niche. But I also kind of like the software as a service space. That's kind of a fun area as well. A lot of those guys have kind of the seed money, the capital injections, and so that's kind of nice because they've got some money to play with. And so a lot of times they're saying, well, we got this money. What are we going to do with it? Well, my suggestion is that you use it on marketing. And so
what kind of marketing? Like, give me some examples of what kind of campaigns and what kind of things do you help them do?
Yeah, so I primarily focus on publishing and media. So that would be I'm creating little books for these guys that they can use as, I'm sure you've heard before the concept of using book in place of business card, right? And so we call it the ultimate business card. So you're handing these out and giving them away, or you're using them also in the form of a shock and awe box, right? You've got your own marketing assets that you own and we've published and helped you create, and then you put those into your box, and that way you can give those away to potential prospects that you're trying to get business from. And then the other thing that I'm big on is what I call platform networking. And so that's doing exactly what you and I are doing right now, using the platform primarily of the podcast to network with other businesses. And specifically, if you can be very strategic about it, you can get the exact right person on your show in front of you, spend 20, 30 minutes, get to know them. And then many times those relationships will turn into business opportunities afterwards. So those are basically the main things that I'm doing for these clients: books and helping them to set up and produce these very strategic B2B podcasts.
Do you help them with their websites?
No, I'm not doing really any website stuff. That's kind of something that
Marco, you need to refer all of those clients to us.
There you go.
What we do, Foster Web Marketing, which is the sponsor of the World of Marketing, and that's what I've been doing for 25 years, is building websites for lawyers specifically, and podiatrists, but other service-oriented businesses. And we also, a student of Dan Kennedy and big, books, everything that you're talking about. We also specialize in video and doing commercials and helping in content marketing.
Yeah.
Information marketing.
Yep.
Education-based marketing.
Yeah, it looks like we can definitely help each other out in that regard. We're both kind of, obviously we can be under the marketing umbrella, and there's so many different things that you can focus on.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things about this world that we're in.
So tell me, you talked about Dan Kennedy, because I like to ask, like, who are your mentors? Like, who are some of your mentors? You already talked Brian Tracy, Dan Kennedy. Who are some of your other mentors?
So I definitely, I just, being on Planet Dan for so long, I end up following a lot of the people that he recommends. So, I've read the Napoleon Hill stuff, right? Because a lot of what Dan talks about, he didn't invent this stuff, right? He's right. Bringing up things that have been around actually for quite some time. W. Clement Stone, right? Gary Halbert, when it comes to the copywriting stuff. There's a lot of greats. Ogilvy, so Dan has kind of taken a lot of these books that were written in the early 1900s, let's say, through probably maybe like 1960s. He got involved in the 1970s. So he had all of that to kind of work from. And then he kind of repurposed it and turned it into his own stuff, and then added a little bit in a way, right? And then, so these principles have actually been around. They've been around for a long time. And a lot of them do come from the greats, that these marketing legends that are now kind of very well known in our niche, anyways. Outside of our niche, most people don't know who the heck they are, but within our space, they certainly are well known. There's another guy named John Jantz. I like him as well. He does the duct tape marketing process, kind of similar, but again, a little bit of a different flavor as well. I've even followed some of the Russell Brunson stuff. Russell's put out all kinds of good information, and even some of the lesser known guys that are students of Dan Kennedy that, by the way, I've noticed you had a lot of them on your show. I consider some of those people to be absolutely fantastic as well. I mean, they've just taken Dan's stuff and just ran with it, and it's super impressive.
We have a lot of Dan Kennedy in our world because we've been in that world for so long. So what are some podcasts that you pay attention to besides? So what are some of those that you pay attention
to? So lately I've been listening to a lot of non-business and non-marketing related podcasts.
Yeah, you got to get away from it.
Yeah, you want me to mention one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, well, hopefully I don't freak anybody out with this, but my favorite podcast right now is called The Exorcist Files.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is just mind-blowing stuff. It's really, really cool. So this was an actual exorcist priest for 20 years. He took all his files and all his information, and then he's now kind of changed the names, but then he kind of does like this. It's so funny how these medias repeat themselves, right? I remember listening to these old radio shows from like the 1940s, right? Where it was almost like a movie, but without watching it. You'd hear the little footsteps, and then it was, there was a lot of drama within that, right? Because all you had was your ears to listen to it. And so here we are in 2023, and I'm listening to podcasts that follow that same exact system and process. And that's how The Exorcist Files is set up.
I'm gonna write that down, man.
Yeah, please do, because you won't regret that. But you may not want to watch it before bed, or listen to it before bed. So just keep that in mind.
That's scary, huh?
It's pretty hardcore, yeah. But it's the thing that's so scary about it is that it's not Hollywoodified, so to speak, like this movie that's coming out here on Friday with Russell Crowe. There's one coming out, and that's just
right. I saw Hollywood. The previews for it. It's like over the top,
100% Hollywood, all the crazy theatrics. What you're learning about on that podcast is actually legitimate stuff, and yeah, some of it is absolutely mind-blowing and insane, but you know that it's actually legitimate stuff, and that's what just kind of makes you say, wow, that's pretty wild. And maybe on a lighter note, I don't know if it's lighter, but I'm a big World War II guy. I like military history, so I tend to follow different either podcasts or audio books that discuss that time period, I just happen to feel like that is an event in history that we need to make sure that we don't let the next generation forget about, because it's such a doggone, such a big deal. And I think we forget, we don't give enough
we're
credit.
Repeating that right now.
That's right.
Doesn't it?
Sure does. So let's make sure we keep that not too far off, distant memory, and be mindful of all the things those individuals went through to keep us free. Because I think there was a president that said we're only one generation away from losing all of our freedoms.
That's exactly right. And I'm very afraid that we're making the same mistakes. And speaking of mistakes, let's bring it back. So what are some big mistakes? What's one of the biggest mistakes that you have made in your marketing life?
Oh my gosh, man. The list is huge. I make a lot of mistakes and I've got a lot of failures under my belt, but the good news is that I do learn. I absolutely learn from them. I think one of the big mistakes is kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. For a while there with my financial business, I had all of my leads were coming from Google, from paid ads on Google. And then all of a sudden, Google decided that the industry that I was in was not acceptable for their standards. So they just completely dropped it.
Right.
And so there I was basically scrambling to figure out, what am I going to do next? Now, the good news was that I was starting to test out Facebook ads, but I was doing it on a very low level. So I was kind of at least somewhat, starting that process. But for the most part, I had all my eggs in the Google basket. Fortunately, also because of my knowledge and background of marketing, I think I was able to figure the Facebook thing out pretty quickly, and I turned the volume up on that. And then it started working really, really well. And so I kind of saved my rear end, so to speak. But the problem was still that I needed to diversify a bit. And that's when I started really paying more attention. Dan always talks about, one being such a dangerous number in business.
Totally. I suffered from the same thing where I had one referral source that referred me business for years and years and years and then stopped referring me business. And I suffered greatly from it.
Exactly. Yep. So I think that's what we should be mindful of. That's one of your
big mistakes. So I totally agree with you. Don't have all your eggs in one basket. You need to have multiple channels for your marketing. What about what's one of your big wins?
I just think that one of my big wins is I got in with this concept of authority marketing that Dan taught really early on, and I started implementing that right away. And once I did the book with Brian Tracy, I immediately noticed a huge difference because it went from, Dan calls it attraction, not pursuit, right? Positioning and not prospecting.
Right.
And so I figured that out pretty early, and I consider that a big win because, so I'm a member of a B&I group. You know what B&I is, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm in a B&I group, and I went in there, and I thought, there's all these business owners in here. I'm going to go talk about marketing, and they're all going to pretty much say, that's just the same old stuff. And I went in there, and I started talking about very, 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 very basic marketing 101. And these people were looking at me like I had invented fire. And that's when I started realizing, okay, the knowledge that I have in this stuff is not something that the average business owner knows or understands. This is actually a big deal. And the majority of them are so focused on their trade or their craft, they are not spending any time trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And so I tell them, hey, you gotta build up your reputation. You got to build up your authority. If somebody searches just your name on Google, a lot of people do that now. They'll say, you know what, before I do business with this guy or gal, let me just search their name up and see what comes, right? And if you haven't spent some time building your authority a little bit and positioning yourself well, there's not going to be a whole lot that shows up. And so sometimes that can be a red flag for people and say, you know what, I looked you up. There was nothing out there. It makes me feel like maybe you're too new or maybe you're not established. And that gives me a little bit of concern versus somebody who has taken the time to do these things that you and I do, like the podcast and the books and and all these things. And it puts all kinds of great authority building content out there. And so I consider that a really big win that I found it and I implemented that right away. And as soon as I did, let me tell you, I mean, I saw a big difference from this concept of me chasing after the prospects to them basically chasing after me. And once I got a taste of that, let me tell you, Tom, I was sold, man. I was like, I'm never going back. This is the greatest thing ever.
Well, good job and congratulations on your success.
Thank you very much. Likewise. Same to you.
And so if somebody wants to work with you, Marco, how do they get in touch with you?
So my website is expertpublishing.associates. So instead of .com, it's .associates, expertpublishing.associates. And then I've also got Pina Colada Media. Pina Colada Media, just like the song, right? PinaColadaMedia.com is where you can get a little bit of information on the podcast stuff that I'm doing as a producer for that. And then you can always look me up on LinkedIn as well. Marco Salinas, publisher or publishing. You'll find me on there. I'd love to connect with anybody in that space. And if anybody wants to have a conversation, I'm happy to do so.
Very good. Well, Marco, thank you so much for joining me today on The World of Marketing. It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you better. I love what you're doing. There needs to be, and you've got such great energy. That's probably why people are like, tell me more, because you just bring such great energy to it. People are like, oh, marketing, but you got great charisma, great energy. So well done, my man.
I appreciate you, Tom. Thanks so much.
Okay, buddy. All right, everybody. It's been Marco and Tom on The World of Marketing. Have a wonderful day.